Well, there we are. We are beginning Libra season with a smile. Hi, everybody. It's Alex, Whitney, and Alexandra. We are back on the weekend news desk here at Nightlight Astrology. We are going to take you through, as an introduction to Libra season, some famous Libras. I picked them, so just fair knowledge. We'll introduce them when we get to them. They are two of my favorites, and I was going through famous Libras, and I was like, I can't believe these two are on the same list. So we're gonna have a really good time unpacking their charts, talking a little bit about their work, how Libra shows up in that, and how their general chart shows up in that. So I think it'll be really fun. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and head to nightlightastrology.com for all your Nightlight Astrology needs. Adam is running his first year astrology for the Modern Mystian course. I believe we're all graduates of that course.
Yes,
taking
we
that
are.
course. I probably wouldn't be an astrologer without taking that course. It literally changed my life. It begins on November 8th. There is an November 8th. The early bird payment is only available until October 24th, and there's always tuition assistance available. If you are on a fixed income or you need some kind of assistance with the tuition, they are always amazing about that, making sure that everybody who wants to take the class can take the class. And there is also the Oracle Within, an immersive retreat, June 6th through 13th, 2026 in Mexico. Oh my God, which always sounds amazing every time we talk about it. The early bird payment is only available until October 1st. And then there are also always amazing offerings over on Adam's website at nightlightastrology.com. We are always so grateful to be here with you guys. So we are diving into Libra season. And we're diving into Libra season with Venus ruling the sun from Virgo, which is a kind of interesting one to see. And that actually will factor in, especially into our very first chart that we're going to talk about. But to begin, you guys, I'm wondering how you're seeing the beginning of this Libra season. Maybe, with the sun's oppositions to Neptune, trining Pluto, trining Uranus, being ruled by Venus and Virgo. If you have any thoughts on just as how this is showing up for you, or anything that you're noticing for yourselves or thinking about this season.
Well, I can say hands down that Libra season has started a little rough. We came into it post-eclipse, right? That 29-degree, pretty gnarly eclipse in Virgo. And we have since been kind of shedding through the layers of what that meant, especially with Venus in Virgo. I have anyway, I won't speak for you both, but thinking about the very high standards I hold of myself, right? And reckoning what those standards look like in contrast to these ideals I have when the sun, which talks about ideals, right, is not in its place of strength. But the good thing is, and we'll talk about this as the month goes on, right? Like, it's just going to get better. What about you, Alexandra?
Yeah, I feel like it definitely gets a lot better. So I'm excited about that. And it feels like we're all in a little bit of a holding pattern right here, just waiting for my favorite astrology of the year, which is from specifically October 13th, November 7th, when Venus comes into Libra. I'm excited about that. But I think with the sun in Libra, Mercury is there, and Venus is in Virgo. Venus and Mercury have a little bit of mutual reception. I'm not really finding that makes everything feel more pleasant or more beautiful, but it does make things more efficient. Like, it's not as stuck. Thinking about some of the astrology of 2024, like the Saturn-Jupiter square was so no movement. This feels like there's some movement happening, but some things that keep coming up for me are like people needing to ask for help and reach out. Libra is a very social place. Venus is a very social place. And so with the sun kind of wounded in Libra and Venus not in her best spot in Virgo, I feel like I am encouraging everybody, and sometimes that looks like screaming at my software on the screen, like, just ask for help, tell people what you're going through, which is something we talked a lot about on our eclipse episodes of last month.
Yeah, I love these. It feels like, it's not like the most fun beginning, but it's a little bit like tidying up is what I've noticed.
Yeah.
Like, just tidying up this and tidying up this, like getting like little loose ends done and tidying up in a really fun way, which is a little bit
some
of a
foreshadowing.
A little foreshadowing. I might even sing. I don't know.
I almost sang right there.
But yeah, it's just an interesting beginning too, with the sun being kind of rendered a little bit powerless by moving into its fall and then being opposed by Neptune. There's a little bit of like our ideals and the way we might think about, visioning might feel a little bit difficult or foggy or even confusing right now. And that's moving on. The sun's moving on from that opposition to Neptune pretty quickly. But there's something with Venus and Virgo hosting the sun as it moves on here. I love what you guys are saying. Just like it may not be exactly the most fun thing, but it's like I need to show myself that I can be strong in asking for help and not just relying on myself, which is a real tendency of the sun, right? It's just me. I can rely on others. And in order to sort of tidy up and pick up all the little loose ends before we move into these beautiful water trines and this, I actually think, really nice astrology, some really nice astrology for the end of the year, it's like, let's pick up the room a little bit. Let's just get everything kind of in order so we feel like, okay, now I've got that settled and we're moving on to the next thing. So, with that foreshadowing and a spoonful of sugar,
If
can
you
we
didn't
bring
do
up?
it, I was going to.
Okay, let's bring up our first chart, and then I'll give a little thought about this. Thank you. I'm really appreciative to these guys for doing it because I could not figure out how to do this. Okay, here she is, the one and only Miss Julie Andrews. Now, I will tell a little story that I think my parents had to go to desensitization therapy for how many times they had to watch Mary Poppins when I was a kid. I watched Mary Poppins like on repeat from the ages of 4 to 5.
You're not alone in that.
I just. And it's interesting. So, we're going to talk about these charts from a couple of different kind of just, improv angles here today, my friends. But, we're also going to talk a little bit about actors and who they tend to play. And sometimes you can see some interesting correlations with that in their chart. One of the things I noticed right away about this chart is Julie Andrews has Venus in Virgo ruling her sun in Libra, right? The exact same configuration we have in the sky right now. If you think about a character like Mary Poppins, right? Mary Poppins comes along. She is precise. She is orderly. She is structured. She is Venus in Virgo in a lot of ways. But there's a sort of gentility about her and a sort of like social acumen about her and a no-nonsense quality about her that all actually pertains to me to be Libra as well. And I think one thing that gets lost with Libra a lot of times is we think of Libra as the sort of the socialite sometimes. You might see something like that, or someone who's just kind of really harmoniously trying to figure out. It's very Bridgerton, for those of you who watch I've only seen season 1 of Bridgerton, but it's very much that kind of thing. Like there's a social... not even hierarchy, but sort of introductions and that sort of thing going on. And I think with the sun, what's interesting though, that gets lost with Libra is that it's the exaltation of Saturn. Like we talked about a couple times on our podcasts on these weekend updates. There's this sense of like Libra also likes things to be orderly and has a very definitive idea a lot of times of how that should be done. So that's why I was thinking of something like a song like A Spoonful of Sugar Makes the Medicine Go Down. I don't think you can get a more Libra ruled by Venus and Virgo type of song. It's not something that's particularly fun, but we're adding a little bit of pizzazz, a little bit of magic, a little bit of clapping your hands and the blankets just fold, to sort of get things going here. So I always think, Mary Poppins, to me, is one of her most famous roles. I know she's done so much over the course of her career. We can definitely talk about more, but that's just where I'm starting with this. What do you think, Whit?
I love what you point out. I love the word you use, gentility. Like, I think it feels so perfect for Julie Andrews. I also think, we talked about the rulers of Libra here, and in her chart, they're configured in an opposition, right? We have Venus in Virgo opposite Saturn in Pisces, and that's an exact opposition. So you can kind of feel that tension in her birth chart in the roles she is playing. The fact that Neptune is also in the first house just adds that, like you said, snap and the blankets fold. It's like that feeling of a magical, like otherworldly quality to this. And what is so crazy to me, you know, with Mary Poppins, I would say, I mean, Julie Andrews will go down in history for all of her works. She's excellent. But it's so interesting that Mary Poppins was her first film, was like her breakout from Broadway. So like, what? You just slam it out of the park in your first time around? Like, that is excellence right there. And I think that that's what happens when you see Saturn. I mean, okay, it's a hard aspect. It's a hard opposition, right? Venus opposite Saturn. But it's also a marker of excellence, right? And not only is she, you know, bringing Mary Poppins out as her first, you know, I don't know, what was it? I actually noted the dates because I'm a nerd, 1964. But that next year, The Sound of Music, the other classic that will go down in history, was released, right? It's like crazy. And 1964, right? She was born in 1935. That's a hell of a Saturn return, people. Like, right? I mean, I'm just like doing the math in my head, right? But 29 years old, that's a Saturn return.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because I was looking at some of the eclipses that were happening. So it was basically the night before her 19th birthday, she debuted on Broadway. And this was during her nodal return. So it was eclipses happening in Capricorn and Cancer, obviously activating that Saturn too. But just her main hesitation to moving to New York at that time was that she was the primary breadwinner for her family at age 19. And so she wasn't sure if she wanted to move to New York, you know, and pursue this, what felt like kind of a risky career. I think that's such an interesting nodal return story, especially one ruled by Saturn. And I think it speaks loudly about the fact that Saturn and Venus are in this visible aspect to one another. We talk about aspects all the time, and I think it bears repeating that an aspect from a benefic is always preferable to having planets in aversion. And it seems like Saturn and Venus are communicating very loudly together in this chart, and they kind of have this interesting relationship together. And Whitney, those dates you pulled too for Mary Poppins, that would have been her nodal, like sort of like flip nodal return, or inverted nodal return. Yeah. So there were more eclipses happening in those places. It's pretty interesting. One other thing I thought that was really interesting about Julie Andrews and looking up her life, and something that we see often for people with a sun in Libra, is that the sun is in fall in Libra, and so solar figures can sometimes have narratives, or, you know, different solar figures coming in and out of someone's life can have complicated archetypes to them. And so in both of the charts that we're going to look at today, that's definitely true. And for Julie Andrews, you know, she actually had a situation where she was kind of, the person she thought was her father was not actually her father. And then at some point there was a stepfather involved in addition to that other person. And there was, like, you know, even issues that she was having with what does she call these different father figures, and everybody had opinions about that, and she did too. So I think that's kind of a really interesting situation, that she kind of became the primary breadwinner, even though she had at this point like at least 3 different father figures in her life.
You know, and you see that so often when Saturn is an aspect to the ascendant ruler or in the first house. There'll be something about like having to be very responsible at a young age. And also, I think, Alexandra, what you're bringing up so beautifully is the ambivalence of the Libra sun. The not certain, you're not sure, you know, with solar figures, like, is he here? Like, literally having 2 or more, you're not sure who the person, who your father actually is, or something like that. There's something so interesting about that with Libra, about a figure in the planetary archetypes like the sun that does not want to be split. It is itself, but there's something about being caught between 2, or not sure where one went. You know, I've seen also with a Libra sun, like a dad who was you know, left at a very early age and wasn't sure exactly where they were, and then came back, and the trust that has to be rebuilt and all that. It's such an interesting focus of a Libra sun particularly. And I think, like, the other thing I notice about this chart, now we may be getting a month ahead of ourselves towards Scorpio season. I think you could relate this to Libra, but definitely her Scorpio moon, which is,
I was going to talk about
right.
that.
love me a Scorpio moon. You know, she also has, you know, she's this sort of smiling figure that comes in, like in The Sound of Music, she comes in and she's smiling, but like they're escaping the Germans during World War II. It's a really intense story, The Sound of Music. You know, aside from her singing on the mountaintop and doing all that, you know, the famous stuff we see, like the story of the Sound. I almost did it. You beat me to it. I'll wait for the next one to sing.
Saying on YouTube, oops.
All right. But there's this feeling of like, you know, she's in really intense situation. Even in Mary Poppins, like she's coming into ostensibly a fairly dysfunctional family in Mary Poppins. You know, when I look at it from a more adult perspective, like they're having a really hard time, that family. And she comes in to sort of like unify and be a unifying force and put order there. And I think what's so interesting too is when you look at, you know, if we stay with Mary Poppins for a second, you know, she comes in and these kids are, you know, by whatever their standards, you know, misbehaving, or, you know, all the other nannies won't take care of these kids. You're seeing that these kids are actually looking for someone to kind of hone and set boundaries and see them, but also set this sort of like structure for them, which I can't think of a more perfect placement of like a Libra placement, Saturn opposing Venus, and Venus and Virgo ruling the Sun in Libra. Like that's just such a reflection in a character that she plays of something so kind of innate in her. And the other thing I just want to say quickly about this is Neptune's so close to Venus. And we should say, you guys, this is a rectified chart. We're not exactly sure of the birth time.
True.
This seems to make sense, but we're not exactly sure of the birth time. But Neptune in the first house is interesting too, because there's kind of an effervescent quality subjectively to me about Julie Andrews. There's a little bit of like she has that sweet, beautiful kind of dignified feeling, but a little bit like you could project on her too. We've talked so much about Neptune on these podcasts together, about this idea of like when someone has a strong Neptune, it's a little bit hard to sort of see where they completely are. But I think that the Libra quality to me sends that sort of beautiful, harmonious, kind, gentility quality, and that's definitely something. It did not surprise me that she was narrating Bridgerton at all when it came out. Like it has that exact same quality in a very different way.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that too. I want to take it back to her moon for a second, if we can. First of all, the sort of moon-Jupiter conjunction that you have here, right? We give a wider orb for the moon because the moon moves so quickly, right? And in this chart, her moon is applying to Jupiter. And number one, I think that says so much about the character she plays. Like, especially in Scorpio, it's totally giving nanny, right? Like motherhood as work, this sort of strategic role of mothering, right? And so I think that's really interesting, but it's also what keyed my memory when, Alexandra, you were talking about the father figure. I'm going to use issue, even though that's not the right word, right? But the sort of confusion and blurry lines around father figures, you know, whether to call her stepdad uncle or pop. Like I read that was one of the things. But she's also quoted, I think, in her autobiography as saying that she had so many mothers, more mothers than anybody else, right? Because, and you know, divorce wasn't super popular for somebody born in 1935 to experience, right? And so she had a mom and she had a stepmom and she had a vocal coach who was incredibly involved in her life, right? And it's that relationship where she's quoted as saying, I've had so many mothers. And isn't that just perfect for a moon Jupiter conjunction?
Yeah, I think she has like an outrageous amount of grandchildren as well. Like I think she has a whole family tree that's like under her, which I think is so funny. And obviously we'll never know, which is part of what this chart says to me. But when I was looking at that moon Jupiter in Scorpio, I was like, there's some things in a closet in her mind palace that we could only dream about.
Oh, yeah.
That's what this chart is saying to me. Like, especially with this like grounded femininity and of the, you know, Virgo Venus, but like maybe some ways that she was punished for it or some reasons that she kept it inside. Like I think that's relevant when we look at the next chart that we're going to look at. But that's like a fun and spooky little third house Scorpio moon Jupiter right there, especially considering it experienced an extended Pluto transit for many years.
Well, right, and you think of all the roles that she plays in life, right, and the different masks that she can wear as an actress, right, an acclaimed actress, and I think that speaks to it as well. But I'm like, she's got to have a good PR person. You're right, because the first thing I thought when I saw Moon Jupiter is, like you said, Alexandra, like, she's got some shit.
But I love that, like, so if you think about when Pluto would have been in Scorpio, when, like, the millennial generation was being birthed, like, she was a prime grandmother figure for a lot of the millennial generation because of the roles that she took at that time. So thinking about that Pluto trining her natal Pluto in Cancer and then transiting that third house moon Jupiter, I think it's really sweet that it kind of corresponds with this rise of her as our grandmother that we all wanted to have.
In fact, I think, if I'm just like doing the mental math, you know that Pluto was absolutely either on her Jupiter or between her moon Jupiter when like the Princess Diaries came out. And
that's exactly right. Yeah,
that was a foundational movie for me. Like, we can go back into the history, back to the, the Sound of Music and Mary Poppins that my grandparents set me in front of the TV, but I was the one who wanted to watch Princess Diaries. You better believe it. So I love that she transcends generations in that way.
And that's such an interesting tie-in to contestant number 2. But just to, what you guys are saying with this is so interesting because they're transformational stories too. She helps transform the family of Mary Poppins. She helps transform Anne Hathaway. But not, in the Princess Diaries, but not into somebody else, into a truer version of who they are, right? You can't put that in a Scorpio.
It's not like the Meryl Streep situation in Devil Wears Prada where you're trying to form somebody into somebody else.
Exactly, right. You're saying you have the Chanel boots, right? It's, it's not saying that. It's saying here's you, we're going to form you into the best version of yourself, which is such a you could put that in an astrology textbook next to Scorpio, right there, right? That idea of the highest ideal of Scorpio is transforming, right? Honing. And then that brings in the Venus and Virgo, and I think her Libra sun too, because, even the Princess Diaries, she still has that regal, I'm the queen, that kind of regal, dignified, genteel is the word I'm going for with today. But, so that's Miss Julie Andrews. Should we do contestant number 2?
Yeah.
My heart will go on and on.
Let's see. I think I can switch it. Yeah.
Yay.
Every night in my dreams.
I see you. I'm done.
This was the first. So we're not doing Celine Dion today. I'm sure we'll do. If I'm picking, we're going to do her at some point. But this is always the song. This is the first song that Michael and I sang at karaoke together. Was My Heart Will Go On.
So beautiful.
Because it was Celine. Yeah. Anyways, I adore Kate Winslet. I've adored her since Titanic, and she puts her hand out of the car and she gets out in that amazing hat, and it's just an incredible shot in any movie you've ever seen.
Whitney, it's October 5th. I was like, I know her Venus is at 1 degree or 0 degrees.
No, it is
October 5th. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Because that's a spooky little Venus for me at 0 Virgo on conjunct Regulus now.
Yeah, I know, right? That's an interesting one. But see, it's so interesting too how similar charts, not completely the same, but similar focuses. But and
this is a rectified chart too. So this is one where we have multiple different sources saying multiple different things. So we're really going off the date here, but
I think Sagittarius rising makes a lot of sense for at least some of her characters. I think Rose in Titanic is a very Sag rising sort of character. The wanting to explore but feeling confined, wanting to live a sort of free spirit life, but having to work towards that. But these are rectified, and I looked around to see if we could find anything more exact, but these are we're working.
I do love the Jupiter as the chart ruler in Aries for her as well. That's pretty. I'm that explains some things that you see in her.
Yeah. Just, but such interesting role. I think she also did before Titanic, if I remember correctly, she did a version of Sense and Sensibility, or one of the Jane Austen novels, which is also, those novels have kind of a Libra-like quality to them. There's, again, that kind of, social gentility, the introductions, the figuring out the relationships, but there's a sort of harmonious, almost ritualized way you go about it. It speaks very differently to me than like a Taurus Venus would be. There's more of like a sort of like a ritual. There's a way of doing this. There's a very there's rigid ideas about how these sorts of introductions are done in that way. Bless
Perfect.
you. Bless you.
Is this what
Bless
we're
you.
looking at, right? October 5th,
Yes.
1975.
That's
Okay.
right.
Yes.
Woo!
Yeah,
Zero.
and
Look at
Alex,
that.
to reply to your point, like I think these are both such great examples for what we're going through right now, because they are Libra suns being ruled by the Venus in Virgo, both of them.
Yeah.
I think there are some interesting parallels. So Julie Andrews in some of her more famous roles has this kind of asexual quality. Like she's not necessarily always appearing as a romantic leading lady. And I think that Kate Winslet has some interesting parallels there with that Venus in Virgo, where she was clearly a romantic leading lady in many of her most famous roles, but in some ways she was constantly being kind of like socially punished for it. Like she was very famously criticized for her appearance, for her weight, for all kinds of like the ways that she would present herself to the world. And I think that can be explained or located, let's say, in the symbol of Venus and Virgo. And some interesting parallels to Julie as well in her early childhood, because her father had suffered some kind of physical injury when he was young and was unable to work as well. And both of these women actually grew up really impoverished and like actually really like scrappy. And Kate Winslet, I think, interestingly enough, received grants, like government grants for artists and the arts to keep herself going in this craft, which I think is cute if Jupiter is indeed her chart ruler.
Absolutely. I think like it's so interesting too to see like kind of the roles she's played. Like I think Rose is probably one of her most famous roles. She'll always be remembered for her role in Titanic. But it's something with that Pluto sitting next to her sun too, which adds a lot more spice to this, which is this sense of like being in caught in a kind of a love triangle, but one person is abusive, controlling. Right, and Billy Zane's character in Titanic is, extremely domineering and abusive and controlling and very the dark side of Pluto. And, there's something about the way she transforms through that, right? That through her process in that movie, she turns, whatever you think about whatever she does. Like I didn't know there was an internet controversy about like whether Leonardo DiCaprio could have fit on the door at the end of Titanic.
Oh, there's a big one.
I didn't know that was a thing. I'm not starting it here. Don't get started going. But I just didn't realize that was a thing until I was looking this up. But like, there's that transformational quality that happens of like moving from something that's very dark and controlling to something that's ultimately liberating and also bringing you back to that true core essence. Now, I don't use Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio, but I think it has a lot of affinity with Scorpio. And there is that kind of quality of like, I'm taking someone back to their true essence. The other movie I think of is The Holiday, where she's, dating a guy who's kind of like stringing her along and like not treating her well. And then meets Jack Black, who turns out to be the leading man. And, and she's again in this sort of like rom-com love triangle, but it's about this idea of like, how am I transforming myself? Am I turning my own sense of powerlessness into power? There's themes that I think in the Revolutionary Road, the one she did with Leonardo, where she's, there's secrets in a marriage that are under the surface and things that aren't being spoken about, but like are kind of erupting out here and there. And there was a great series on HBO called Mayor of Easttown, what I watched with her, where it was amazing. And that one had a lot of Libra justice themes in it. That's why I wanted to mention it. Like there was a sense of like being the detective, but also having gone through something horribly traumatic. And also in that show, without giving you spoilers, she's caught between two very difficult places. In that show, she's caught between her friend, and she's caught between her job. She's caught between places. And one thing I found with Libras when I work with them in practice, I found it in my own life as a Libra moon, is there's sometimes a feeling of being the fulcrum of the scale, like you're caught between two opposing sides, two fighting parents, two people at work, whatever it is, or a moral conundrum of some kind where you're caught between what your ideals versus a friend, the truth versus keeping someone you love safe in some way. There's often that kind of feeling, and I think in some, I don't know her movie role exhaustively. I'm using these as examples of Libra in this chart, but that's just something I was considering with that Pluto particularly.
Yeah, I think that also with, just to go back to Mare of Easttown, only because it's the most recent piece of her work that I've seen, right? It was on HBO just a couple of years ago. Now, what's my favorite Kate Winslet film? Of course, it's Titanic. I literally, so for Christmas, my mom gave me the box set because, this was back in the day of VHS, and it was such a long movie that you couldn't have just one VHS, right? And I remember carrying that thing around with me, like taking it from my mom's house to my grandma's house so that I could continue watching it. I mean, I was just obsessed. But that is a huge aside, because I was talking about the Mare of Easttown, and I think that what's so prominent in Kate Winslet is this incredible ability to completely transform herself and sort of disappear into these characters. And in fact, in her first movie, she's quoted as saying, her first movie she ever did was called Heavenly Creatures. It was in 1994. I haven't seen it, but she is quoted as saying that it was really difficult for her to detach from that role. And sometimes that can happen with actors, right? When they get so submerged in their character that it's hard to pull out. And that was also one of the commendations around her role in, if we flip it to the positive side, in her Mare of Easttown, right? And this is years and years and years and years later, so she's obviously learned something. But Richard Roper wrote that she, has this this work added to her long list of disappear into the character performances. And so when I think about that, of course, I'm looking at Neptune again in the first house. And we assume that this rectified chart is accurate, right? But when you have Neptune sextile that Pluto Sun Libra that you were talking about, I feel like you get that level of intensity that also has the quality of oops, maybe you lost yourself, you know what I mean? And obviously something she's had to work through. So I think that's really interesting. Even just on Mare of Easttown, the work that she did to get the dialect right, it's a very, where is it, Pennsylvania?
I think it's central Pennsylvania, central western Pennsylvania, yeah.
And it's a very specific dialect, right? And so she worked with a vocal coach to really, really hone the accuracy of that. And I love that with her Mercury opposite Jupiter in the fifth house, right? Too, that feels like that sort of submersive, vocally submersive quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're talking about that Sun-Pluto thing, both of you, I'm thinking of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind as a great reference point for a Sun-Pluto contact and transformation and volcanic corrosion and eruption of the self and suppression of the self. And that is definitely coming to mind. And for both Kate Winslet and Julie Andrews, so much philanthropic work, charity work. That's just coming up to me for Libra, which seems to make a lot of sense. One of the things I was really struck with for Kate Winslet's chart is I love planets. I have a freak interest in any planet at 0 or 29 degrees. It's where my brain always goes first. And I was thinking about 2011, I want to say it was 2011 when Regulus moved into Virgo because of precession, and it was a big thing. Regulus is the Virgin now. And it was just too good in Kate Winslet's biography I had to share, because she literally in 2011, when this happened, met the person she's married to. She's been divorced twice prior to this person. He worked at Virgin Galactic, the space company. He was the grandson of Richard Branson, and they met and married and had kids in 2011 when Regulus moved onto her Venus. And I was like, that's too astrology good. I got to share.
Okay, but at that time, too, I'm pretty sure his legal name, like he had changed his name, and his last name legally was Rock and Roll.
Rock and Roll. Ned Rock and Roll.
Which is like, yes, Ned Rock. Which, like, okay,
that's
Venus
some rich people
Uranus.
BS right there.
Yeah. I'm going to marry Ned Rock and Roll. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh my god, that's amazing. I love those. I love it when that stuff lines up, like where you're just like, oh, come on, that's just great synchronicity. It's too good. It's too good. Yeah, that philanthropic work, it was kind of, tying these guys together here, tying up the knots here on these guys. There's a sense of like, I saw Kate Winslet do an interview once. I think it was with a young reporter who was fairly new. I think she was really nervous to be doing this interview with her. And she leaned into this young woman who was doing the interview, and she said, this is going to be a great interview because we decide it's going to be a great interview. It's going to be awesome. Everything's going to be fine. I was like, if I saw a Virgo Venus come out there, right? A Libra stellium come out there, I want this to feel harmonious and balanced, and I'm going to help you do that, and I'm going to reach out to you, even though you're doing the interview, to reassure you, to be of service to you, to be generous towards you. I love that. I just think it's such an example of like, usually one of the things that will happen with Virgo a lot is they're the person who will always ask you how you're doing first. Yeah. The Libra will always ask you how you're doing first, right? And I thought that was just such an interesting example. When I saw this chart, I'm like, yeah, that being ruled by a Venus in Virgo, the Libra stellium being ruled from Virgo makes a lot of sense. In that particular instance, I really noticed it. Yeah. So before we end, my friends, what are our favorite Kate Winslet and Julie Andrews movies?
Well, I already gave mine away. My favorite Kate Winslet is Titanic. I will forever be carrying around that two-tape box set in my brain and in my heart. And as far as Julie Andrews goes, I have to put Sound of Music first, but it's so closely tied with Mary Poppins. It so is, and it's all because of that nostalgia. I mean, and I just like ran around my early life like singing about The Hills Are Alive with The Sound of Music, so they really stuck in my head.
Totally. Sound of Music for me too. My grandma made sure that I had all the musical theater classics in my brain, and it was like Sound of Music or Gypsy. Like those were the movies that I watched on a daily basis at my grandma's house, sometimes singing in the rain. But yeah, definitely Sound of Music for Julie Andrews. And I think it's in theaters right now as part of its like, God, I don't want to say the number, but an anniversary release. And for Titanic, Whitney, I had the same experience. My mom asked my teacher at school, I remember I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, and my mom was like, do you think I could let, my kid watch this movie? And he was like, watch it in 30-minute chunks and have discussion sections after. So I got over the course of a week to watch the 3-hour movie, and we would have all these little conversations about it. It was such a funny thing. So I'll just always remember that. That's got to be my favorite. What about you, Alex?
It's Mary Poppins. I mean, practically perfect
it's so
in every way.
your astrology.
It's so many.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
It really is. Oh, here's this fabulous woman who's going to help me clean up. What does a 3-planet in Virgo want? We're going to organize?
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do it. So, clearly Mary Poppins. I'm going to go with The Holiday. Just because The Holiday was, and this might sound cheesy, but that was a very empowering movie for me. Like, when there's a scene in it where she finally sorry this is a spoiler, you guys, but if you haven't seen this movie, reprioritize your life.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Like, come on. And she throws, like, the jerk out of the house, and she just goes, I finally got gumption. She does that, and I'm like, it was I remember watching that, and I'm like, that's going to be me one day. I'm going to do that. So it was a very empowering movie for me at an earlier point in my life. So it has to be The Holiday for sure. I love that movie. Yeah.
Such a good
but I also love Titanic. I have to put it with Titanic like right there because
it depends if you want to laugh or cry, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Both at the same time.
Exactly.
Depends on how mad you want to get about the door.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Whoa, I didn't know what I waded into in that comment section. I was like, geez, we're taking these things seriously on the internet. So anyways, my friends, thank you for joining us for this introduction to Libra season and looking into very famous Libras. We will now go around and say where you can find us. It's so Mary Poppins. Okay, kids, let's sit in a circle. And everybody says. All right. So whoever's not laughing
I'll
the hardest.
go. 9 Lives Astrology. That's me. Number 9 Lives Astrology.com, on YouTube, on Instagram. I do Monday videos with the transits. I do all kinds of readings. You can book them on my website and check it out. Whit?
That was so funny. I'm still laughing. Like, who even am I? Where can you find me? I don't know. But I do. astroarcana.com to book a reading. And you can find me over here on YouTube. Just, 1 or 2 clicks over at astro.arcana.astrology. And find me at that same handle on Instagram, where you can find all sorts of great content.
And you can find me at www.alexamorosi.com. You can book readings with me there. You can book energy healing with me there. And you can also find me on Substack at The Subtle Universe. I didn't forget this time. On Substack at The Subtle Universe. And I have a free level subscription. I have a couple paid level subscriptions. Not forgetting, my friends, that Adam's first year course begins on November 8th. It's amazing. We've all been through it. It literally changed my life. Like, I would not be doing astrology if I hadn't done that course. So it's just an amazing course. And we thank you all so much for joining us and all our giggles today to open Libra season. And we will see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.